Hello there. My name's John. I hope you're ready to go for a ride today, and I will be talking about beginner bikes, quote-unquote beginner bikes, and my thoughts on them. If you are watching this, hopefully you're thinking and pondering these same things, so I hope my opinions and thoughts might be able to help you out. Dear Lord, please help us to have a safe ride today. Thank you for this bike. Thank you for the time we get to be on two wheels, and please be blessing and just watching over the folks that are watching and listening to this video. And help me to be a good citizen of the road and stay upright, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Alright, so here we go. I guess as a matter of introduction, I'll just say my name is John. I very much am a beginner rider, and I don't mind saying that. I think that's a tag I'm gonna put on myself maybe for about a full year. But I've been riding for 6 months. I've rode in sub-freezing temperatures. I have logged hundreds of miles on the highway and our back roads and windy roads. But again, I would say very much still a beginner. Let's roll through here. And I think it's just good also to be a lifetime learner in general when it comes to a lot of things, but especially something as complex as riding a motorcycle. Like, I'd like to think that I'm still growing as a driver of a car, but driving cars is, once you've done it for several years, it's pretty straightforward. A lot of the things carry over, but I don't know if there's much else that's new for me to learn about driving unless I was going to get into racing, and that's when you really push it. But this content and my thoughts on riding bikes is not racing, and I think that's important because a lot of the content you'll see out there for motorcycles is about how to ride as fast as possible, which in the real world is probably not what you're going to end up doing. If you're thinking about getting a bike and you're asking this question of, well, should I get a 125cc mini bike, or should I get a scooter? Should I get a beginner bike, quote unquote, that's 250 or 300 cc's? Or should I go for a big boy bike at 500 or more cc's? Or the Kawasaki Z400 or their Ninja 400. This is a really good and very important question to ask, and it's one that I hope to help you out with figuring out today. I don't think I mentioned it yet, but this is a 2015 Honda CBR300r. It's a single cylinder. You'll notice that the engine revs up to about 10 grand RPMs. One thing you'll note, which is a key differentiator between bikes, is not just the size of the engine, but how high they rev. And you'll note that some cruisers might redline at don't quote me on this, but it's nowhere near what a super sport bike will redline at, which it might be 16,000 RPMs. And I know Honda's 500s, for instance, I think that redlines at about 8,000. So there's a couple things you want to look at. One is the size of the engine, the number of pistons, and just the overall performance and tuning of the engine, which allows it to redline a lot higher before that limiter turns on. I'm going to take an opportunity to practice a U-turn because that's the road I want to be on right there. Here we go with a little U-turn action. Pop it in a second. Look where I'm going. And I can turn tighter than that Uber right there. Alright, so I'll walk you through kind of what I was thinking about as I was making my decision to get my first bike. My initial thought was to get a carbureted 70s Honda, like a vintage, and maybe cafe it. Not exactly cafe, because I wouldn't do the clip-on bars. I would do like higher bars just to be in a more upright position. But that was my thought. It was, hey, I'm gonna ride I want to be one of these cool hipster bros on a cafe racer, and it just was a matter of education for me and preference, because I very well might want to do that someday. I think it would be a lot of fun to have a cafe bike, work on it, mess with carburetors. But one thing I knew about myself was that other than my commute, I would have very limited time to ride and to dedicate to the bike. So the important thing that made me change my mind was the need for maintenance on the bike. And a cafe racer or an old vintage bike, it is just going to take time to get to work, and it's going to take continual tuning. I don't think there's a computer in one of those bikes, so it's just very very, very manual what you do. So the question was, do I want to spend, whatever free time I have riding, or working on a bike, so maybe that one time in the future I could be riding. So I can't tell you enough how nice it is to work on the bike when you want to, and not because you have to, because it's not running. So maybe if somebody has any more input on what it's like to really own one of those bikes, that would be helpful. But as me, I'm a dad, I work, I have a lot of other priorities and things, so having a bike that gets me dependably where I need to go is really important. So what I did was I did buy used, and I did buy a 300cc bike. What one of these bikes will allow you to do is to go on the highway. Despite topping out at about 90 miles per hour, this bike can actually get there pretty easily, and it is actually very comfortable up over 80 miles per hour. Nice to get away from the biker cruiser bro. So I would say, if you're going to consider getting any bike, one thing to consider is how and where you want to be riding. I would suggest, if you're a person that drives cars on the highway and occasionally needs to travel on a highway using a car, I would suggest getting a bike that would work on the highway as well. There's a lot of reasons not to do it though, so I don't want to push anybody. But the highways are open roads, and riding on those at the speed that you're comfortable with, even if it's like 55 or 60, riding on the highway at that speed is going to be a lot more convenient, and your route's going to be a lot shorter than if you force yourself to avoid highways. So I would say consider that. Take any bike, find what their top speed is. You can find that online. There's probably people that make top speed YouTube videos, and then just maybe subtract like 10 miles per hour, and that's probably a speed that bike would be comfortable at. So yeah, I'd encourage you to consider that, how you're going to be riding. So a very important consideration is what top speed you want to be going at. So do that. And then next is the idea of power and torque and the ability to get around. I'm not going to say too much on this, but just know that when a random person on the internet or a friend advises you, everybody talks from their own perspective, and how much power a motorcycle has and should have is a very, very relative thing. So just know that when one person says, oh, that this bike is way too much power, or this bike is, just the right amount of power, it might be not exactly applicable to you. So just keep that in mind. So as far as the conversation on whether a bike has enough power for you, if you're one of those people that wants to go over 300 cc's, just know that a lot of people have differing opinions on what enough power is, and you would just have to weigh and consider that yourself. So somebody might say, oh, a 300cc bike it does not have enough power, it's a small bike, it's weak, you're going to get bored of it. That might be true for some folks, but I definitely haven't found that for myself. even if I push the limits on this bike completely and I ride this bike as hard as I can, that's a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, I'm not there yet. And another thing is, I probably don't ever want to get there, just because I don't think I ever want to get there, just because that's going to mean you're riding very hard and taking high amounts of lean angle on a light bike like this, which might not exactly be the safest or most sustainable way to ride. Man, I gotta tell you, I like watching YouTube videos of people riding their bikes hard. I like watching those, and I like not doing that myself, because for every video there is out there of somebody riding very well and very technically, there's going to be another video of a guy totaling and wrecking their, $10,000 bike, and I'm just not about that life. So if you want to, if the money you spend on a bike is like blow money, and you're like, okay, this is for fun, I'm going to ride this till I wreck it, then go ahead and do that. But I can't help but think that a lot of these folks, as they pursue riding as a hobby and as a sport, they don't regret just how hard they were riding when they realized they've wrecked one of their biggest investments, or thought, hey, maybe I should have spent more time practicing and taking it easy a little bit as I ramped up my risk level. So those are some thoughts. If I get us back on track here, if you don't want to be on the highway and you know it, you might have a lot of fun on a 125 bike. I think those bikes are really underrated, except for if you talk to somebody that rides them, because people who make the decision to buy a Grom or a Z125, they generally love them. So I talk to guys, they love them, they just can't get enough of them. They don't take them on the highway, and they ride it around the city or on their commute, and it's just a fun little bike. And the things weigh about 200 pounds, so it actually makes them a little easy to steal, which is not a good thing. But it is something you could potentially like just throw in the back seat of not a back seat, but throw in the trunk of your car, which is a handy option if you got a really good deadlift and you've been doing CrossFit. Why don't we see what a beginner bike can do here? It might be good, might be bad.